You're listening to a social justice podcast hosted by Nicola Spurling, brought to you by The Flag Shop, and inspired by a social justice coloring book. Hello, this is a social justice podcast. I'm your host, Nicola Spurling. Today, I'm joined by Aphrodite Janeway for a conversation about sex work. Aphrodite, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Aphrodite Janeway, as you said. I have an OnlyFans and a Pornhub account, which I actively maintain. And I'm just about to get started seeing clients as well. That's kind of my main shtick right now. It's kind of the big thing that I got going on.
And that explains why you're here on the podcast today to talk about sex work. And thank you so much for having this conversation.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's taken me a little while to find a guest for this podcast. I've reached out to a few local organizations. They're at sort of full capacity, so it's hard to schedule someone. I've reached out to some local sex workers as well, and they've just been reluctant to share their stories because I guess it's a safety concern, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I like to start all of our episodes by just having a conversation about what the topic is. So can you maybe explain what sex work entails?
Well, sex work is the larger umbrella of people who have sex for money. Technically, I am right now I do online pornography is kind of my main avenue. It's what I'm using to supplement my extremely low disability income.
Oh, okay.
And I've been doing it for a couple of years now. I enjoy it, which is a really nice thing about it. And it's something that I'd be doing anyways. So, it's nice to be able to monetize our hobbies, as so many of us end up doing. They say if you're doing something you love, then it's not quite so much like work. And, as a disabled woman, that's particularly important to me, finding something that is not, really mentally and emotionally draining. That's kind of what I've been looking for in work. Sex work also includes seeing clients and out-calls and in-calls. It's not something that I'm doing yet, but I'm just about to get started because I moved recently and I can't afford my rent. So
okay,
yeah,
trying to add some income to the pile, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. You can't deny what's the word I'm looking for? The return on time invested is significant.
Right.
As far as owning the means of production is concerned, and being in control of my own means of production, I sure am. And that's what I really like about it. It's something that I can do myself with relatively little overhead. Again, that's something that I, as a disabled woman, need in my employment, in my income.
Right. And was it fairly simple to get into as far as setting up accounts that are necessary and I guess finding that income?
It depends. There's definitely a lot of variability, of course. Setting up a Pornhub account, pretty easy. You just need to be legal and to be willing to prove it. And as long as you do, then it's pretty easy. Same with an OnlyFans. And, you got to link up your accounts and things like that. That can be, given that we live in Canada, that can be a little bit more complicated because nobody expects people to live anywhere other than America.
So it's a US-based site.
Everything is. Yeah. Everything is. Even monetizing my Facebook, they're like, oh, you're in Canada. That's weird. So I've been having trouble with that. And then, of course, when it comes to the real nitty-gritty, seeing clients, there's websites that exist out there which index people. And, of course, there's certain websites cater to certain audiences. So there's one website which shall remain nameless, which caters to trans women in primary. You have to pay them to list yourself on the website. And of course, it is illegal to generally do that, or at the very least, you kind of get into the same thing that happened to OnlyFans, where credit card processors object morally to the kind of content that's being generated. So they will not process your money.
Okay.
So I can't just give them a debit card or anything like that. I actually have to buy Bitcoin
Oh my gosh.
And pay them in that. And I think also I need to get my girlfriend's help with it because it is complicated. I'm a computer technician. My background is in IT, and it's still complicated because you need to buy like in euro. I don't know. I don't know the exact process yet, but
right.
It's complicated, and she's done it like 4 or 5 times, and every time she does it, she makes a mistake and puts too much money in, has trouble getting that money back out. It's almost as if it should be legalized and regulated.
It almost is like that. Yeah, we will get to that in a little bit. Yeah. Just when it comes to the topic of sex work and what it is, I think a lot of people know the word prostitution.
Yeah.
Is sex work a replacement for that, or is prostitution something that falls under the umbrella of sex work?
I would consider it something that falls under the umbrella of sex work. When most people think of sex work, they don't think of pornography. Mm-hmm. But pornography is definitely under the umbrella of sex work. Mm-hmm. So porn stars are sex workers, as are like OnlyFans models, they're sex workers. Mm-hmm. Even if the only people they're fucking are themselves. I can swear on this podcast.
Oh,
right?
yeah, go for it.
Good, yeah. If the only people they're having sex with is themselves, then they're sex workers. And then, of course, people who actually see clients, they're also sex workers. And generally, I think we use the words escort and what is the other word now? I can't remember it.
Not sure.
Yeah, I can't remember the other word.
But, yeah. I mean, I know that someone that worked as a dominatrix, for instance, who didn't have intercourse with other people, but was still under that category of sex work.
They're still technically a sex worker, yeah. Mm-hmm. I used to see them back in the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was my first introduction to sex workers, as a matter of fact, was a dominatrix.
Oh, and is that sort of what prompted you to go, this is something I could do as well?
That was pre-transition. So, maybe a tiny voice in the back of my head that didn't really understand the feelings I was having. Mm-hmm. But over time, certainly. Like my avenue has been through porn for sure. Like, mm-hmm. I definitely look at porn and I'm like, I could do that. And like when I masturbate, I'm like, that was a pretty good one. It's kind of a shame there's no camera in here for that. Like we got a fucking machine, my wife and I a while ago. Mm-hmm. And that was when I was like, have to monetize this. I would like to watch this. And what better way to do it than to upload it to Pornhub, and then other people who also want to watch it, they can do it too. And Pornhub will slide me a penny every time someone watches it. So.
Right. And I guess when it comes to sex work being work, which is something we believe on this podcast,
certainly is.
Can you write off something like that as a business expense, or does the government not view this as legitimate work that you can do that with?
That's a relatively good question. I'm not sure. I know that we can euphemize a lot of things. I'm a model, for mm-hmm. example. So all the things that have to do with modeling. But as a disabled woman, I don't make enough money to be eligible for any kind of tax breaks. So
I see.
It's kind of pointless for me to do that. But mm-hmm. it's a nice idea.
Right. Maybe things take off and you're making tons of money. It might become a thing.
Then I certainly would. Yeah, like pornography, I'm fairly certain, is considered an actual, is a tax write-offable business function. So mm-hmm. I think that would work. I think you can do things like you can write off your bedroom, like a certain percentage of your room or your house could be used for work.
Right.
And then you can get a tax break on the square footage. That I think that comes like off the rent that you pay in toto.
Yeah, it's rent or the interest on a mortgage.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's an option. Again, hopefully someday I'll be able to take advantage of that because it would be pretty cool. But I don't know to what extent that goes. And then of course, seeing clients is like if you're actually having sex with people, you're not allowed to do that. So,
right.
You're not allowed to purchase sexual activity.
Right. So it would be your clients that would be.
Yeah, they would be the ones that get punished.
Right.
But which is obviously still ridiculous, but it's a little bit less ridiculous than coming after us. And certainly safer than coming after us. But, it's just, it's ridiculous, and it shouldn't be that way.
There are, I guess, on that note, quite a few people that don't think sex work should be legal for whatever reason. Can you maybe explain, if you even know, why people are under that impression?
Well, as someone who used to live in America, I tend to assume that it has to do with like a religious upbringing. But I'm sure there must be larger, deeper philosophical underpinnings for that. It is literally the oldest profession, as the cliche is said. So there is that to consider. But especially like, conservatives and the right wing, I don't really know. I can't understand the way they think about so many things. Like, they're very hypocritical, because who are the people that we tend to see the most? Are right wing people. Yeah. I'm not sure.
I just found it quite interesting when I was doing some research for the podcast to see that there's so many countries where at least some aspect of sex work is criminalized.
Yeah.
And it could be, specifically related to, you're not allowed to open a brothel in this country, or you're not allowed to sell yourself, or you're not allowed to purchase the services of someone else, or whatever it might be. The rules aren't always the same, but there's always this underlying, some aspect of this should be criminalized for whatever reason. And I mean, I don't know what the reason is, so I figured,
like, I think also it has to do with poverty in general. Like, usually the people who are sex workers are starting from a position of poverty. Like, I am doing it specifically to lift me above the poverty line in Canada.
Right.
As someone on disability, I'm paid 60% of minimum wage, approximately. So I need to make up that 40% somewhere if I want to reach people who are being paid the least amount that it is legal to pay people in Canada.
Right.
So where is that 40% going to come from? I cannot get a normal 9-to-5 job. The government and my doctor and I have all agreed that is the case. So to force myself to do that would be hurting myself to do that. When I do that, I find that I don't have the energy to live my life. So like my health declines, my mental health declines, and I can't maintain a social life. I'm just miserable, and what is the point of being alive at that point? And I would rather not live like that. So
right. And I guess possibly some of the apprehension that people have around sex work is the idea that some people are being forced into it. You might say that you're forced into it as a result of poverty, but then there's also cases of human trafficking, for instance, where people are literally being, physically forced into those situations.
I definitely see those a difference between those two things. If you I on the one hand, it is true. Like, I am being forced to do this. I probably would just have videos on Pornhub if that was all I needed to do, because it is something that I enjoy. It's easy for me to just throw up a camera and just record it.
Right.
But when it comes to seeing clients, there's considerably more risk involved in that. So yeah, I'm being socially coerced into doing this because the government is unwilling to support me at the level I need. Whose fault is that? The government's fault. That's a systemic failure, which is pushing me into this scenario. It's clearly different than being trafficked. Obviously, sex trafficking is a real problem. The fact that both of these things are illegal and seen as equivalent is I think like a problem because it puts a lot of attention on people in my situation when I don't really need the attention. The people who need the attention are people who are being trafficked against their will.
Right.
Those are the people that need our support. That's the aspect of this that should be illegal. And the way that the government has lumped the two groups together obscures the real problem.
Right.
And I think that's something that needs attention.
Yeah, I also found it quite interesting in reaching out to people for this podcast. And I had one organization decline my request because they said, you've done a podcast on human trafficking, and we don't support anti-human trafficking work because it actively works against sex workers. Do you think that that's the case? Do you think you have to be not necessarily pro-human trafficking, but not focus on it in order to support sex workers? Or is there a balance of saying, well, human trafficking is bad, but also we need to acknowledge that in a way that doesn't harm sex workers?
I mean, yeah, I don't understand what their point is there. It seems like it would be pretty easy to differentiate between the two. Like if we're talking about somebody who's being trafficked, we're talking about somebody who has no autonomy, who's not in control of the finances. Like they're basically like they're not even working class. You know, like not only do they not own the means of their production, but they're, whoever is in control of them is the one making the decisions with their money. They take their money, and then they pay them out of that money. And maybe,
right,
if they pay them at all. And that seems like a fundamentally different relationship, and like that seems fundamentally wrong, in a radically different way than what's happening to me.
Right.
Like it's true that Pornhub is still taking the lion's share of the profit from the videos that I have on their website, and same with OnlyFans. They take 30%. So like they're obviously exploiting me, but like that's just kind of the way. What am I going to do, right? Like all I can do is what I can. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism, so I have to participate in the system because it exists all around us.
Right. And I guess there's also a distinction to be made between being exploited by a company when you sign an agreement with them, as opposed to someone taking absolutely every aspect of control out of your hands.
Yeah. Like, absolutely. Like, I don't see, like, I still have the freedom to leave Pornhub. And if I get like a critical mass of attention, then yeah, I can leave. Even if I don't, even if I'm just like, you know what, I'm over it. I don't feel like doing this anymore. I can just stop.
Right.
And like if you're being trafficked, you can't do that. That's kind of the whole point.
And is a human trafficker and a pimp the same thing, or can you have a pimp acting in a manner where they're not taking advantage of sex workers?
I don't know. Like, we're still operating within that framework of, somebody is the boss and somebody is the worker, right? Only when you are a sole proprietor working for yourself, are you in a situation where you don't have a boss and it's just you. So I would suggest, that would depend on like the ratio of income that you're getting from that person. Are they listening to your input? Are you like, hey, I'm doing literally all of the work, and you're just like, answering the phone basically and telling me when I have an appointment? It seems like I should be getting the majority of the money, and you should be getting a minority of the money.
Right. So treating it like your average business situation, if the service they're providing is as a secretary, essentially, then, they get paid as a secretary, but you are the main thing. In as much as like the secretary tends to do more work than their boss.
Like, whereas in the pimp scenario, the pimp is, as the boss, is not really doing anything. So
right.
Kind of the inverse of that. But the spirit remains. The idea is still there. Yeah.
Right. One of the terms that I've come across is Squwx. In my research. Can you explain what a Squwx is?
Well, they're like a TERF. It stands for sex worker
exclusionary radical feminists,
feminist,
and
right.
TERF would be a trans exclusionary radical feminist,
right? And these are feminists who see themselves, who exclude sex workers from their safe spaces. They consider sex workers to be unsafe, so they don't want them around. It's a type of bigotry,
right?
I don't know if this organization still exists, but there was an organization that existed in the Vancouver area, which was like that. They would exclude both trans women and sex workers from their shelters.
Right. They recently lost funding from the city of Vancouver. They do still exist, but they're
lost funding.
At least not being financially supported by the local government.
Perfect. That's great. It would be nice if they would just stop existing, but short of that, the fact that they lost their public funding is great. I have not encountered much with that, probably because the aspect of sex work that I interact with mostly, like in the case of that organization, you like if you had been injured or assaulted while doing some sex work, and you went there and you told them that that's why you needed shelter, then they would turn you away. But most of my pornography is with myself or with people I know, so that doesn't really apply to me. But the idea that they would turn anybody away for who needed assistance is, of course, insane to me.
Right, absolutely.
Especially, in the case of trans women, of course, and in the case of sex workers, of course, definitionally, you're there to help people, and you're just like, yeah, except for those people.
Right. It's kind of like if you were to go to a hospital saying, I need help because I, just cut myself, I need stitches or whatever it might be. And they said, well, sorry, we don't like some aspect of you, so we're not going to help you out.
Yeah. It's like trans broken arm syndrome.
Exactly. Yeah. Or,
sex worker broken arm syndrome, apparently.
Yeah, I guess something along those lines. But I'm glad to hear that you personally haven't really experienced that.
I have been lucky, that's for sure.
Yeah. I guess we talked a little bit about your experience with a dominatrix in the past and how maybe there was some subliminal messaging happening that prompted you to get involved in sex work. But can you point to a more definitive aspect of your life that led you to wanting to be involved in sex work?
Being on disability. I spent a lot of time thinking about how am I going to lift myself out of poverty, and what is in what way can I do that isn't going to be too stressful, isn't going to be too tiring, and is going to be something I actually enjoy and find rewarding. After thinking about it for several years, I was like, well, it seems like a nice, easy thing to do, of course. Great, I'll have sex with people and I'll get paid for it. Easy. Fantastic. But inevitably, the reality is not that easy, of course. So I wanted to make sure that my motivations were that I knew what I was getting myself into. I met other people who were doing sex work of various kinds. One of my girlfriends is a sex worker that sees clients. In seeing how she deals with her clients and both the trauma and the reward that comes along with that territory, I had a front row seat to be able to consider, is this something that I really want to do? Do I want to expose myself to it? One of my partners also used to do sex work a lot, and had numerous bad experiences, very, very bad experiences. And I remember explaining to somebody else, maybe it's just not worth the trauma.
Right. You're sort of weighing the pros and cons of doing it.
Yeah. And there's just nothing really else for me to do. I don't have the concentration available to make YouTube videos. But I still have this need to do something creative. I do want to express myself creatively. And pornography helps me do that. This, ultimately for me, it's about poverty and getting myself out of poverty. And, that's where seeing clients, comes into it. There's a much higher, the hourly rate on that is pretty good. And the scheduling is, firmly in my control. And scheduling is a very common problem for me. It's definitely part of my disability. So I just weighed the pros and cons, and over time I'm like, yeah, what else? What other thing is going to give me similar opportunities that I can do entirely on my own? Like I could probably help somebody with my IT background if they were making YouTube videos. Like I could do that, but are they going to pay me enough to bring me out of poverty in doing that? Probably not. Not until they're like a big YouTube channel, and that takes a long time to get there. And I'm poor now.
Yeah.
So
I'd made YouTube videos for 2 years. I think I made $100. So it takes a while, and if you're, not the person making the video, then you're only getting a fraction of what that person's getting. And I could definitely
capitalism rears its ugly head once again. So, and I mean, that's like working with friends, and like one of my girlfriends makes YouTube videos, and she's in the same situation. She's definitely not made enough money to live on. Never mind pay me enough money to also live on. So, where is this money going to come from? As much as I would like to just eat the rich, I still can't bring that to the bank. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because every episode that we do of this podcast, or almost every episode, we talk about the intersectionalities between the subjects that we're discussing. So we did a podcast on disability, and we talked about how the government doesn't give people enough money to live on.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's not just about you don't have enough money to go out and do fun things. It's you literally don't have enough money to pay rent or to get food or whatever it is.
If I was required to pay my rent and food and medication bills all on my own, I would be at a $400 deficit every month.
Wow.
And that's still an estimate. Like that's still. And that's staring at the wall. That's like, you're not buying any video games. You're not going to the club. You're not going to the bar. You're not buying any alcohol. You're not buying any weed. You're going home, and you're scrolling down on whatever free service you can get access to.
Right.
And that's still like where, that $400 deficit is like, that's the internet bill too, like that's where who's paying for the internet bill,
right? And that's hugely expensive in Canada.
Yeah, and my phone bill, So where is this money supposed to come from? They don't cover injections, and I take estrogen injections. So how am I going to pay for that? And progesterone, how am I going to pay for that? What am I going to do? I'm going to sleep with people for money. That's what I'm going to do. Record myself having sex with myself.
Right. Well, and speaking about sleeping with people as opposed to doing sex work online, how do you make sure that you stay safe when you're doing that? Whether it's making sure that you are not being forced to do things against your will, and making sure that you're safe from STIs, for instance. Like, how do you take care of yourself in that sense?
Well, the government does have a program for high-risk people for PrEP, so I don't have to pay for that, which is nice. They do make it very difficult to get it and stay on it, though. So that's annoying, but at least it's free. And then, like, generally they need to wear a condom. Nobody likes getting a blowjob with a condom on, though. So generally, that's a risk factor. But at least I'm protected from HIV in that case. So there's that. There's the basics, right?
Just kind of your standard safe sex practices that you might use at home would apply in those situations.
Or if you meet a stranger at a club or something and you want to have sex with them, it's the same kind of stuff.
Right.
So pretty basic stuff. You get tested regularly. Testing is also free, thankfully. The basic stuff. And then also there are some communities which monitor very casually Like there's nothing formal, right? But like if you have a bad experience with a John, there's places you can go and be like, this is the person's name or phone number. And I had a bad experience with them. You can explain the experience if you feel the need.
And you can go to those places to look up the person that you're going to be spending time with? Yeah.
There's also an app, I think, that will help that as well. Like you can label people, again, via their phone number. And that can help give you a warning, like, like time wasters and things like that.
Right.
Because you get a lot of people are just trying to text a hot girl and masturbate on the other end of their phone. And that's money out of my pocket, right? So you need to keep an eye open for them. And also that same app will keep track of, like this guy was violent unexpectedly. And things like that.
And that's how you protect yourself against the physical violence side of things are there other avenues, or that's sort of the main one is you just look up, see if they're on this registry, and
those are the main ones. Also, the buddy system is good. Having somebody nearby, that's going to be my main plan. Fortunately, I like strong girlfriends. So, many of my girlfriends are quite strong. So, I feel quite safe with them around.
Right. And they would check it, like if they haven't heard from you in a certain amount of time. Then
like it's an hour-long appointment. So, if you haven't heard from me at this time, I don't want to, like when the hour's up, you gotta fucking go, get out of here, or else I'm going to charge you again.
Right.
So, it should be able a relatively, consistent schedule. I know that's what's like with my partner. She's been doing it for a very long time. So, she is more comfortable doing things on her own. But still, sometimes when she's seeing somebody new, like I'll be there in the other room and, just a quick clear my throat sort of thing. And,
Gotcha.
and she often notices them like, look, and like, whoa, there's somebody else here. And that's right. That's correct. So,
right.
Those are the main things. I myself also know martial arts and I'm kind of strong myself. So
right. So taking some sort of personal courses or something along those lines to make sure that you have the ability to defend yourself if you need to.
I definitely believe personally in a multifaceted approach. But of course that's easy for me. Like I can bank on my pre-existing martial arts experience. That makes things a little bit easier for me.
Right. And do you think sex workers should have the ability to unionize?
Oh, of course. Why not?
Just like any other job.
Any other worker.
Having that security.
Well, like I have friends in New Zealand, and it is legal there under regulation. And like they have a central website that they sign up for. And I don't know the full process of how it works over there. I don't know if they I don't know if they're technically a union. I know that there's recently been protests over there about treatment of strippers. And I think the strippers are being prevented from forming a union. We're in a major gray area. Like if we were to actually try to unionize, like who would we unionize against?
Right.
At this point, like there isn't even a central organization or even any kind of there are brothels in Vancouver, so presumably unionizing would be open to them, but
right, if you don't have a boss,
but of
some kind,
like we should probably unionize against Pornhub.
Right.
And OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Some collective action would be very helpful for us there. Like the rate of return on a Pornhub video is very low. And it seems like it could probably be higher, but
right. That's a good example.
Yeah.
So you mentioned OnlyFans. Has OnlyFans significantly changed the way that people engage in sex work? Because Pornhub has been an option for a lot longer. But it seems like OnlyFans is a different business model in a sense.
Sort of. OnlyFans is terrible.
Okay.
They're the worst. I hate them. The cut they take is large. Their website sucks. There's no app for my phone, which, I'm I'm sure if there was, I would hate that too, because I'm sure they would have annoying things in it as well. They just seem hostile towards us.
So it hasn't necessarily made sex work more accessible.
I don't think so. Like the problem with it is you can't use it to find people very well. Like if I actually tried to use it to like find people through OnlyFans, it's very difficult. Like you can find a specific person by searching for their username, but like if I, as someone who likes to masturbate, wants to masturbate, you can't really go there. Like it's more like you find somebody on Pornhub and you're like, oh wow, I like this person's content. I would like to see them actually orgasm instead of the, right up to the second where they're about to orgasm and then they cut, so that they can move their premium content onto something that has a larger payout rate.
So what happens in that instance? You get to that point in the video and it tries to redirect you to a different site where you have to pay more money? Or?
They say, do you want to see the rest? They put like a little splash screen there. If you would like to see the rest, check out my OnlyFans.
I see.
And then they'll have a link, or usually they just have their username like in the video, and then you can go search for them. And also, usually they have the same model name on both services, and you can probably. I don't know how well Google interacts with OnlyFans now that I think about it, but presumably you could Google it, a model's name and like Aphrodite Janeway, for instance, and my Pornhub modeling profile and my OnlyFans modeling profile would show up.
Okay.
And then what I'm about to do, because I do need to drive more people to my OnlyFans, as much as I dislike it, it is true that the payout, and even though they take a large percentage of the payout, the overall amount needed to access the content is like on a monthly basis. So like $5 a month, for example, is how much I charge for mine subscription. And OnlyFans takes their percentage, and then I get the rest.
Okay.
So like, there's a lot of incentive to push people towards it, which is great from a monetization point of view, but from like an accessibility point of view, is not great. I'm not one of these people that loves paying for porn. Especially since I'm poor, like I can't afford to pay for porn. So I do love my free porn. So I kind of am at a bit of a philosophical crossroads. I'm actually like literally just about to start monetizing my OnlyFans more.
Okay.
Because I need more fans. Because again, like I get like a penny per view on Pornhub, which adds up, which is great. But I'm trying to make up for, like $6 an hour or something like that, right?
Right. I guess it's more reliant on the views as opposed to the subscribers.
Yeah. So like if I get one subscriber, they're paying me $5 a month, as opposed to like to get $5 for one video, that's thousands and thousands of watches.
And so does that mean that Pornhub will make their money off of selling ads on their website?
Yeah.
And then you're getting a penny per view because someone has paid for an ad that is...
Yeah, I'm getting some fraction of their ad revenue.
Right.
That some other company has paid them to advertise on.
Right. And does OnlyFans not have ads in that case?
No.
Okay.
OnlyFans has no ads.
So that would be the reason why someone would pay a subscription for OnlyFans as opposed to Pornhub?
Yeah. And also because it's paywalled, anything like if you want to actually see the content I have on there, you have to pay. So again, like you get this part of the video on there, and then the climax of the video, you put on OnlyFans.
And I guess that might be helpful for people who are maybe worried about people in their lives finding out about the fact that they're involved in sex work. They might go, well, at least if I go on OnlyFans, someone will have to pay to get there as opposed to someone randomly stumbling across my video on Pornhub.
Yeah, I think so. Like if I wanted to conceal the fact that I was making pornography, OnlyFans would probably be a good way to do that. Like you can have a model name, and then you can obscure your identity in your profile photo, and then only if you pay will you be able to see the content there.
Right. And is that a common experience that people would try to hide it? Or do you kind of go, once I'm involved in making pornography of some kind, you just sort of have to assume that people are going to find out about it?
I can't speak for other people in that one. I know some people don't want to do that. Some people don't want other people to know that they're making pornography, but I don't care.
Right.
My mom knows I make porn. So does my stepdad. I'm sure they try not to think about it. But like it's something that I like to do, and I will not be ashamed of myself.
Right.
And
it doesn't create complications for you in your life to have people know?
Yeah, not yet. And partially advantaged because I'm disabled, right? So, I'm not going to be a teacher, I'm not going to be, a banker, any of the business opportunities that might come my way will probably be related, like if I get an IT job or something ever again. But also, I also don't want any of those jobs,
Right.
I don't want to go back into IT because I left it for a reason. And also on a personal level, I find the idea that anybody might care that somebody makes porn offensive.
Right.
So if you do care that I make porn, I think you're an idiot and I don't want to work for you anyways. That somewhat ironically, a privilege, given that I'm on disability, that I can have that attitude, because at the very least, disability will pay for the rent. So if nobody will hire me because I made porn for a while, and that's just so offensive, then I'll still be able to keep myself housed at least.
Right.
So thank you to disability for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something that I consider as a trans person as well, right? Is the moment I was publicly outed, I couldn't get jobs anymore. Yeah, at least through traditional methods.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is indeed a. I have multiple partners dealing with that particular issue right now. One of my partners is very talented, and she's been having tons of difficulty finding work. And it's funny too because her family just does not understand. Like, what do you mean? You're having difficulty finding work? Tons of work out there. And on the one hand, she is being a little bit picky because she doesn't want to be a bartender anymore. And then on the other hand, she's trans.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, a trans woman. Oh, we don't really. I don't know what to make of trans women. Trans men are great though. Hire a bunch of them.
I don't think people realize how much an employer's perception of you can affect your ability to get a job. I mean, it sounds simple from like a one-on-one basis, but when you're actually putting resumes out to multiple companies and you look at the statistics of how many times am I successful when I send out a resume, like I used to send out 2 resumes and I'd get a job interview out of that. Now I'll have to send out 200 resumes to get a job interview because you Google my name, you find out I'm trans, you find out I'm involved in Green Party politics and for whatever, whether it's
and you're on
one or the other.
With the word social justice in the name.
Well, there's that now, but fortunately that's my job now.
That's good. That's good.
But it can really make a difference. So I think that's an important point.
I've had this discussion with people in the gaming industry as well. They're like, if you come out while you're working in the gaming industry, probably going to be okay. But if you come out and then you want to get a job in the gaming industry, definitely going to struggle.
Right. It's a lot easier to not hire someone than to try to find a reason to fire them that's not the actual reason.
It's a common problem. It's a very common problem. It's very hard to get work as a trans woman.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's not today's topic. We've done that topic and we'll probably do it again at some point. But coming back to sex work, what supports are sex workers lacking? We've touched on a few, but if you had to sort of pinpoint some of the major issues of either governmental support, societal supports, whatever it might be, what do you think is lacking?
God, what isn't? Like obviously, legal support is lacking. Just trying to be safe, trying to do things in a safe way is difficult. Like again, we exist in this gray area, both legally and culturally, socially, and really when it comes to socially, like we're a little bit worse than a gray area. I can just imagine what my extended family must think. I'm sure it's a secret to them. But yeah, the support is lacking all around. There's no collective bargaining for us. Most of our work is decentralized. So like Pornhub, we're all working out of our own apartments, or on set. So our ability to collectively bargain is compromised right from the start. And again, legally, our ability to be protected, to receive protection from the state. If I needed to call the police and get some help from them, something I would hopefully never have to do for a very long list of reasons. I'm not sure if I can do that. Certainly the police have a history of not treating sex workers very well, especially trans sex workers.
Yeah, I've heard reports of people being dropped off on the other side of the city by police officers when they call for help.
Yeah, so if somebody if a John is violent in my house, what am I going to do? My big plan is for me and my girlfriends to take care of it, right. Because I'm not in a position where I can rely on the law, even if they were close enough to actually get there in time to be of any help. I'm just as likely to be injured by the police officer as I am by the angry John. Right. So there's that as well.
Yeah, and I guess as far as state solutions as well, there's, for you being on disability, you talked about how you can fall back on that income if you have to, but someone who's not, who is getting their sole income from sex work, I imagine you can't apply for EI.
I'm sure the government would prefer if you declared that income. But I'm not sure if it's a good idea to do that.
From a safety standpoint?
Yeah, that's complicated. That's something that I'm very much in the middle of figuring out. Yeah, the government has a very strange attitude towards us. I know somebody who is starting the entrepreneurship program in Vancouver, where they're paying her to start up her business. And one of the things she's not allowed to make is pornography.
Oh, it's a stipulation of a contract or something?
Yeah, it's a YMCA contract. Oh. And it says you're not allowed to make pornography.
And it's because of how it would reflect on the business?
I don't know. They don't explain themselves in the paperwork. They just say don't do it.
Yeah, I remember hearing a story of a teacher who had an OnlyFans account and was told to delete the account or be fired, basically, because they didn't think it reflected well on the school. They didn't think it was appropriate for a teacher who's involved in kids to do adult things in their
I hate those words
time.
too. I hate the word appropriate.
Yeah.
That it's used so much as a weapon.
It's so subjective too, right?
The word professionalism. People love to wield it against other people, and I just think it's bullshit. On the one hand, if she is doing it because she enjoys it, then that's good. That's a good thing. Expressing yourself is a good thing.
Right.
Everybody should be allowed to do that.
And it's behind a paywall, so I'm trying to think if a student is underage, they're not going to be able to
get there. That's
right.
A very good point. And the idea that it would reflect poorly on the school doesn't have anything to do with the school. She just works there, and if the school really didn't like it, maybe they should pay the teachers a little bit more.
That would be nice.
So, because again, usually the reason it's happening in the first place is because somebody is not making enough money. And they're looking for ways to monetize, to make more money, to fill a financial deficit in their life. And if you have the skill and the interest the personality to try and do that, then you should.
Yeah, I think that's becoming more and more of an issue too. People who have great jobs theoretically still can't afford basic living expenses because wages aren't keeping up with inflation. So as time progresses, it's as if everyone's just getting poorer and poorer.
Yeah.
Most people are. I recently listened to a podcast where a teacher was talking about how he wanted to buy a house and he couldn't afford to buy a house in the area he was living. And one of the comments on it was, well, we've failed as a society if the people who are educating our kids can't afford to buy a home where they live. And he was at the point of considering, do I give up teaching in order to achieve this dream of just having a place to live?
Yeah.
Right? It seems like a pretty simple dream, but you couldn't have both essentially. Or if you did want to have both, you'd have to do something like OnlyFans or some other type of side gig.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a major problem. I've heard also the example if the person who makes your coffee can't afford to live in the city where you're getting the coffee, you don't live in a walkable city. That's what it is about walkable cities. You don't live in a walkable city. You live in a theme park. And I think about that a lot because, of course, there is a coffee shop just up the street. And it's like I can barely afford to live in this area.
Yeah. I mean, I commute to work I still don't think I could afford to live in the city, but when I was younger, I definitely couldn't. So it was, you're going to commute 45 minutes to an hour just so you can afford a place to live and also have a job that pays the bills. That was a necessity for me. But I think about the fact that as things get more and more expensive, we're pushing people further and further out. And then you add on tolls, which can prevent people from getting to where they need to work. And eventually you push people so far out that commuting's not even an option.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting close to that point here in Vancouver. And I think what happens when you do get to that point? Because you lose all of those restaurant workers, like you mentioned.
I mean, that's the situation we're in right now. Like if we assumed I was making minimum wage, I can't afford to live. I need to move 30 to 45 minutes away. Only by virtue of being too poor to leave my apartment, am I still able to afford to live in the area? Because I moved in there like 10 years ago, and thankfully they can only raise the rent so much per year. So I'm paying like $1,000 less than that actually. But almost that much, less than some of the other tenants in my apartment building.
Right.
Because other people have moved out. And then when people moved in, the company, which owns my building, significantly raised the rent for those people.
Right.
But thankfully I'm grandfathered in and I'm able to stay there. But of course, the landlords do not want me to stay because I'm costing them thousands of dollars a year.
And now we're starting to sort of intersect with our housing and wealth inequity podcast episodes, which we've done. So
while I was thinking a lot about this podcast, I'm like, we're going to end up talking about disability a lot. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like I mentioned earlier, it's the case with all of our episodes. They're always intersecting with each other.
Yeah.
And bringing it again back to sex work a little bit more specifically, we're getting close to the end of the questions that I have for you. So at this point, is there anything related to sex work that we haven't talked about that you think would be really important to raise for our listeners?
My main concern has definitely been the intersection of disability and sex work. That was the thing I was most excited to talk about today. The way that like porn is the thing that I like to make. I'm as I said, much more concerned about seeing Johns because it's just inherently more dangerous that way. So I prefer to not have to do that. But given the complete lack of movement on paying disabled people enough money to live, that's what's on my mind, right?
So the government of Canada is really the human trafficker then.
Especially technically, the BC government is the one that's decides how much money I get.
Right.
And they also forced me to be paid out of my own pension as well. So, which is taxable.
Wow.
So I had to pay taxes on my disability, which is below minimum wage.
That's ridiculous.
And I'm like, and so like that happens, right? And I'm like, how am I going to deal with this? Like, what is the way out of this problem? The government clearly not going to help. I've been writing the financial minister for a long time. In fact, almost every time I cannot do something because I can't afford to do it, I send the financial minister an email explaining that I cannot do this because you are underpaying us. And I've been doing that for a long time, basically since I've been on disability, which is at least 5 years now. And you know, basically nothing is happening. We are supposed to be getting this increase of $125, which you'll note will still not bring us to minimum wage.
Right.
And it's coming out of, that's only being applied to the housing portion as well. So depending on how your housing arrangement is being paid for, you may not get all of that money as well. Right. If you live in BC housing, you don't get any of that money. Your money does not change because it goes directly to them, right? Whereas, like, if you have a classical landlord arrangement, they pay me and then I pay the landlord. But if you're in BC housing, they pay for your rent directly.
Right.
So it wouldn't actually put any extra money in the pocket of anybody living in BC housing.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So that's unfortunate. So yeah, like I feel like that's the most important thing about sex work in British Columbia and Canada. Like people definitely do it for fun and for freedom and for enjoyment, and that's great. People should totally be allowed to do that. Where things get murky is where people are forced to do it because of their financial situation,
right?
And that's when things get bad. That's when people get desperate, and that's when desperate people make mistakes. That they see jobs that they shouldn't. You know, like everybody tells everybody, if you've got a bad feeling, if you listen to your gut, if you're texting with somebody and you're like, I don't know about this guy, stick with that feeling and just say no.
Right. So sex work is work. Sex work should be legal, but people should have the ability to consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I try to end all of these episodes with a question around what our audience can do to help. So what can our listeners do if they're thinking, I want to make sure sex workers are better supported?
There's so much that could be done. First of all, sex work needs to be legalized and regulated in Canada. At the very least in British Columbia. It'd probably be easiest to start at more local level and then go out from there. People are worried about like creating a central database that sex workers are members of. I think that concern is fair, and maybe there's some creative solution around that, but ultimately that's the basic idea that I think, and like the minimum thing that needs to be done to protect sex workers of all types. I think removing the desperation component of sex work is another very important thing. So making sure that people are compensated financially for being alive properly. So like, you know, wages across the board need to go up. Minimum wage needs to go up. The disability rate should probably be tied to the minimum wage. And of course, that's ignoring the fact that being disabled is more expensive.
So and both should probably be tied to inflation as well.
Both should be tied to the cost of living even. So I think those things at the very basic level would help a lot. You know, maybe a universal basic income if we're going to get real fancy.
I support that.
Yeah. Like I think that those things would go a very long way. And it would be relatively simple to implement towards protecting sex workers. You know, keeping us safe, because when things are illegal, it tends to be unsafe. Some regulation would be very helpful in that regard, I think.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been great to speak with you, to catch up. It's been a while since I saw you last.
Yeah, indeed. My pleasure.
Yeah. This has been a social justice podcast. I'm your host, Nicola Spurling. Today's topic has been sex work, and I've been joined by Aphrodite Janeway. You've been listening to a social justice podcast hosted by Nicola Spurling, brought to you by The Flag Shop, and inspired by a social justice coloring book.